Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone in the audience to close all laptops, silence all cell phones, and any use of any device that could distract or make noise during the event. The Berkeley Forum is a nonpartisan, student-run organization on campus that hosts talks, panels, and debates from a wide variety of speakers. Driven by students, for students, our members work tirelessly throughout the semester to enhance intellectual discussion on campus by bringing speakers to talk about the most urgent ideas of our time. Every aspect of our events is run by our student staff, from event photography, marketing, financial development, speaker invitations, moderating, and much more. Please subscribe to our events on Facebook and stay updated on our webpage at forum.berkeley.edu if you're interested in learning more about our organization. Tonight, we are honored to partner with the Graduate School of Journalism here at Berkeley. So excited to be able to be at this beautiful venue with them. If you're interested in learning more about their events, you can follow them on Twitter at UCBSOJ. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce the Dean of the Graduate School of Journalism, Ed Wasserman.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to welcome you here tonight on this beautiful evening. Our guest today is here to remind us that change in the news media isn't all for the worse, and that disruption and bone-rattling innovation are exciting realities that are not confined to the West Coast. This is Jim VandeHei's second major go at introducing smart new news organizations into the media sphere. In 2007, he collaborated with fellow Washington Post refugees John Harris and Mike Allen to create Politico, an online news site that made Inside the Beltway a term of endearment. Politico almost immediately became rivals to the mighty Washington Post and the equally mighty DC bureau of the New York Times. Mike Allen, the Times had to acknowledge, by 2010 was the man the White House wakes up to. For his part, Jim VandeHei soon was appearing regularly as a political analyst on shows like MSNBC's Morning Joe. He co-moderated 2 presidential debates in 2008 and was named 2015 Editor of the Year by the National Press Foundation. Politico was bringing in a reported $20 million in revenues thanks to offshoots and robust events business, and expanded into Europe and into state coverage, notably Florida and New Jersey. Jim described their operations in 2013. We pump out roughly 3,000 stories, 2,000 push news alerts for subscribers, and 1,000 reported morning newsletters in an average month. Soon we will have more people producing political and policy journalism in Washington, Europe, and state capitals than any publication in the world. Now, as much of a stir that they caused when they founded Politico, they made an equal impression when Jim and Mike Allen left in 2016 to found their new startup, Axios, with $10 million in financing. Axios started publishing in January of this year with a sharp, contemporary look and a uniquely engaging reader interface, a scroll of concise postings. Jim spoke of a marriage of The Economist and Twitter. He also described it as a rolling R&D lab. Axios had the gall. Its website currently shows a hefty staff of 86, is that right? With offices in DC, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and Boston, and probably others. The problem with the fast-moving organizations, you go to the website, it's already out of date. It soon broke the news that Gary Cohn would be Fed chief and Jared Kushner would be a senior Trump advisor. Jim is here to tell you all about the theory and practice of Axios, what they intend to do, and how close they've come so far. So it's my great pleasure to welcome to Berkeley, Jim VandeHei.
So damn high tech that I've got my notes here from the hotel. It's good to be here. I tend to look at journalism in the media through my own career because I feel like I keep living through these different periods of disruption. I'll get it by the end. I'll get to why I'm so optimistic about today, but it took a while for us to get to optimistic. I was for most of my life until 10 years ago when I became an entrepreneur, I was a journalist, and I thought that's what I would do for the rest of my life. I was lucky, caught some breaks early in my career, and was able to cover the presidency, cover national politics for the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. And got to fly around on Air Force One, got to interview presidents, and it was a cool job. And I thought, why the hell would I do anything other than this? And then around 2006, when you guys were still really young, the world was changing in pretty radical ways. You could see that the internet was taking off, cable TV was taking off, and suddenly it seemed like our industry was getting rattled. And You could either get in a defensive crouch, or you could say, hey, I want to help change things. I want to help save things. So 10 years ago, I'm at the Post, and this is how much the world has changed in a decade. When I was at the Post getting ready to do Politico, WashingtonPost.com was a separate company. It wasn't even located in Washington. It was located over the bridge in Virginia. I think I was probably one of the few to ever venture from the paper over to the website. And this was at a time where you had web analytics and you could tell more people were reading you digitally, but nobody wanted to believe it. So you take it 10 years ago, so everyone's walking around with a flip phone and thinking, what's going on with the world? So in that year, so just think about this. In late 2006, when I'm thinking of leaving, there's no Facebook, there's no Snapchat, there's no Pinterest, there's no Instagram. The iPhone was born in early 2007, there's no Android, there's no BuzzFeed, no Huffington Post, no Politico, no Breitbart, no Reddit, no Upwork. Like the world that you live in now, these like crazy seas that you try to navigate, they weren't there. There's a couple of newspapers, your local newspaper, your TV. The world was pretty static. And in fact, that world had been pretty damn static from the creation of TV through the web disruption. If you wanted to take a picture or share a picture, you actually had to use a camera. You had to go get it, go get it printed out. And you had to put it in an envelope and mail it to somebody. If you were mad, if you didn't like the coverage, there's no Twitter. There's nowhere for you to pop off. You had to write a letter to the editor on something called paper. And then you had to hope that they would print it, which they didn't. Or if they did print it, that someone would read it, which they didn't. So the world was just different. The cloud was like something that like ruined a sunny day. And so then technology comes in and it blows everything up. And it was a profound shakeup for our industry. We had people who had done something the same way, not just done something the same way, they made a lot of money. Like it might seem like a foreign concept to people, but these used to be profit centers. They used to shoot up tons and tons of money, which is why they got complacent and why they didn't change. And so the reaction to that did, I think, some really bad things to the media. And I always try to think about, like, when did the media and politics, and they both happen at the same time, when did they go off the rails? I can't pinpoint the moment, but I do think I was part of it. I remember, I had to go actually Google this today. It's a great story. So it's about 2010, and all of a sudden, like, people are posting more stuff. Everyone's just trying to figure out, how do I get more traffic? And all of a sudden, this gives everybody more opportunities to write what they want, say what they want. And lo and behold, Sarah Palin is running for president. And not just running for president, she's leading in the polls to win the Republican nomination. Okay. So I'm working at Politico at the time, and Mike Allen and I would write a piece. We talk to everybody around Bush, everybody in the establishment, and we do this piece, but everyone was afraid of her at the time, so it's mainly anonymous sources. So we do a piece saying how scared Republicans are, how they think this will destroy the party. Sarah Palin goes on Fox News and says, I'd like to use anonymous sources to say that Jim VandeHei is a piece of crap. Then she goes onto Twitter and she says, I would like to elaborate. Jim VandeHei is, according to my anonymous sources, is a homophobe, child molesting, tax evading, anti-debt type, yes, she used that term, puppy kicking, chain smoking porn producer. Yes, she said that, and yeah, like a lot of people thought she should be president. So right around this time, a couple days later, I worked with people were interested in politics. I'm doing Morning Joe, and right after Sarah Palin's leaving, this guy named Donald Trump is thinking about running back then. And so I go on Morning Joe, and I'm explaining to Joe how nonsensical this is. I'm like, he's a liberal Democrat. Like, he can't run as a Republican. It'll never happen. I walk through his ties to Hillary, all this. I get off the phone, and Maggie Haberman, who worked with us at the time, she's now at the New York Times, she emails me and she says, hey, the Donald just called and wanted to pass along that you're a big piece of shit. So that's where the industry, I think, is starting to tip, and politics is starting to tip. And it creates what I've written a little bit about. It's written what I call the crap trap, which is business models media companies were sitting there, their business models were suffering, they're under attack by Google and Facebook, they don't know what to do, and they assume, give me as many eyeballs as humanly possible, and that will be a business. sounded smart at the time, but what happens when you decide that you want to reach the largest audience possible? You have to appeal to the lowest common denominator. So suddenly you had all of these sites popping up, producing mass amounts of garbage, some of it valid, some of it not. And it created this perverse incentive by companies to keep getting more and more traffic. They thought they would make more and more money, but the laws of supply and demand kicks in. If 100 companies are getting 1,000 times more people to their site, guess what? There's so much supply out there that it pushes down your ad costs. So they weren't actually able to make any money off of this. And this is happening as all of our minds are being reprogrammed by these iPhones that we're all staring at, or Androids that we're all staring at. So now you've got all this stuff being pumped at all of us as we're scrolling and clicking and sort of sliding our days away mindlessly. And this is creating a couple of dynamics. One, Google and Facebook are starting to eat up our industry, basically destroy their industry, but they're eating up all of your time. Suddenly people are spending hours and hours consuming information. A lot of the stuff that got caught in the crack track is what people were consuming. People were, by the last couple of years, people are checking their phone 100 times a day. There was a study out 3 weeks ago, that the average person is consuming some form of media 12 hours a day. Think about that for a second. Most of us, I hope, at least sleep 6 hours. That means that 2/3 of our time is spent consuming some form of media. And it's consuming it like this. So no wonder you see these various studies about how about the human attention span is shrinking and shrinking. Think about yourself. We all feel distracted. There was a Microsoft study or whatever that said that our attention span has gone from 14 seconds to 8 seconds, which is the same as a goldfish. And if you're like me, I feel like that goldfish is kicking my ass. And the mindlessness of it all. You've probably seen the same studies. 50 to 60% of the stuff that you're sharing on Facebook or Twitter, you haven't even read. You're just sending it because there's something that created some kind of dopamine response, got you all jazzed up to share it and to send it. And so all of this stuff is happening, and I would say the election, more than anything else, sort of brought into in stark relief that we might be at a tipping point. That what happened? Suddenly, everyone's losing trust in what they read. People are all falling into their filter bubbles. And one of the worst things about social media is that any jackass with an opinion can find a bunch of people who will agree with them and cheer them on, no matter how ludicrous that opinion is. And guess what happens when you have companies like Google or Facebook offer awesome technologies that reach, in Facebook's case, 2 billion people without any regulation. Lots of weird stuff happens on those platforms. And it's human nature that somebody's going to use that information to manipulate. That's what happened in the election, right? We had manipulation of information by an distracted and distrustful public, and it ended up with a result that nobody thought was humanly possible. And now has everyone reconsidering social media, politics, our own media consumption, the truth. And there's so much talk about fake news, and fake news is bad. I'm a hell of a lot more scared that people don't believe real news. You see the same polls, 50, 60% of people don't believe facts. I'm a fact guy. I am pro-facts. Every company that I'm working for, everything that I do, I will go down fighting for facts. But there are a lot of smart people out there that don't believe anything because of those filtered bubbles, because you can find people who will friend or follow you no matter what you think. Because if you're a liberal, you can go listen to Rachel Maddow because she's so smart, or Sean Hannity because she's right? There's always somebody who will cheer and reinforce your view. And so to me, that's sort of where we stand. So you can say, geez, like that sucks. Like we're screwed. I don't think we are screwed. I think there's things that we have to do. I think there's changes that have to take place. And I think that there are changes that will take place. One, there has to be some regulation of these big social media companies. There has to be protection for consumers so they know what they're consuming, where it's coming from, and some indicator about whether or not it can be trusted. Two, and this has been my obsession, is as media companies, we have to start building products that people want. There's a reason people went to Facebook and to Twitter. I grew up writing 1,200-word stories at the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, because that's what I was taught to do in journalism school, and damn it, my ego won't be satisfied unless it's 1,200 words. Like, well, guess what? Most people don't read 1,200 words. Most people think most stories can be accomplished in 100 words or 200 words. So look at Axios. Axios was built to make sure you can synthesize those stories that should be shorter, much shorter, and give people a cue when something should be longer, and when it is longer, actually make it a nice, beautiful reading experience. Why is it that I have to go to a website and get these stupid pop-ups, these stupid autoplay things, these weird banners? It looks like a nightclub. I just want to read a freaking story. And that was like the Bezos genius with Amazon. Like, think about the customer. Us in the media, think about the reader. What is the best possible experience for you? If we do that as a company, people will reward that. If you write and behave in a way that you earn the reader's trust, they will reward you. Other thing that media needs to change is reporters. Like, Twitter has been the worst possible thing in some ways for reporters, in that for whatever reason, it triggered this unleashing of their animal spirit to pop off and to share their opinions in a way they never would have done, ever, when I was at the Washington Post or at the Wall Street Journal, or even in the early days of Politico. Suddenly people felt liberated to either show off for their colleagues or for whatever reason, pop off to the public about loving Hillary or hating Trump, and that's not your job. I'm sorry, if you're signing up for nonpartisan media, you've got to do everything in your power to check the ideology at the door and earn people's trust. So those are things that we can do in the media. Provide a better product, keep and earn the reader's trust, fix the platforms. And then third, I would say it's on you. It's on us. We live in this culture where we all want to blame somebody else for all our problems. You're the one making a decision about what you're consuming. You have a social network. You have a personal network. Read. Take it. This should be information nirvana. This should be information nirvana. We have more access to more good information by 1,000-fold than at any point in humanity. Period. But that's on you. That's on me. You have to go out and seek the good information. You have to get rid of all the garbage that might otherwise distract you. And you have to take advantage of it. Because I tell you what, if you don't, the world's not getting more simple. It's getting more complex. It's not getting less connected. It's getting more interconnected. You're going to go into the professional world. Whatever you go into, it's not going to be enough just to be a really good documentarian or a really good editor. You're going to have to understand politics. You're going to have to understand technology. You're going to have to understand business. You're going to have to understand the world, because all new ideas, all new companies, all conflict are going to come from the collision of those topics. And so the burden and the opportunity, I'd say, is on us as a company to help all of you sort of navigate those issues. And I'd encourage you to go to Axios.com, because I think we do a darn good job of helping you navigate that. But then it's on you to go seek that out and encourage other people to seek it out. If you get in the profession, to do things that enhance the reputation of you individually and the company that you work for and the profession that you've chosen. Then hopefully we can get rid of or start to squeeze out fake news. We can start to restore faith in news. Otherwise, the clock's ticking. It is ticking, but we don't have an infinite amount of time to fix some of the problems that we have right now. We've got to get these things right. I think media is a big part of that. You see it every day. Harvey Weinstein, scumbags gone. Why? Because of the media. People abusing travel in Washington, exposed. Why? Because of the media. You're aware of what's happening in Korea and the dynamics in general. The media. So the media matters, and we need to. But the way to make media matter for more people is for all of us to get it right. So we're going to do Q&A. I'm happy to answer questions more. I'm happy to talk more about Axios. I should use this is more of a platform for that. But I'm happy to talk about that. I'm happy to talk about some politics if you want. We spend way too much time thinking about that, but obviously we have an amazing lens into the White House, and we've interviewed Trump, and we interviewed Sheryl Sandberg last week with Facebook, so we spent a lot of time thinking about these topics. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. VandeHei. I'd now like to invite our student moderator for the evening, Michael Chen.
Well, Mr. VandeHei, thanks so much for coming to speak to us.
You gotta
It's,
stop calling me Mr. Man.
It's an absolute honor. Yeah.
Damn.
Well, I want to take it back to, I guess, the beginning when you realized that you were falling into what you call the crap trap, clickbait journalism. Why did you decide to kind of break out from the norm, start Axios, instead of kind of staying within Politico and maybe changing the rules of the game from within?
I mean, is it everything in life? There's lots of reasons, right? One, I'm restless. I like to do new things. I would say I got addicted to starting companies or starting products when I was at Politico. I think I'm decent at it, so I wanted to give it another whirl. The big one, though, is I saw an opportunity. And well, the way I look at businesses now that we start them is you've got to have what is a need that needs to be filled, and if you can fill that need, is there a plausible way for monetization of that idea? And to me, the challenge now is different than when we started Politico. Politico, at the time, all it was filling to me was this need for more political coverage, more depth, with more analysis, hooked up to the web, taking advantage of cable TV. Our belief was that that's what Washington needed, and our theory was that if Washington needed, anybody who cared about politics would ultimately get sucked into it, and mission accomplished. The new challenge, I'd say, for all of us is the one I outlined up there, which is the world is more complex today than it was a decade ago, and it's going to get exponentially more complex. And that for people who care about serious news consumption, and I do believe that's still a nice chunk of the country and ultimately a nice chunk of the world, there has to be a better, more efficient way for people to have a fuller understanding of politics, technology, business, media consumption, which is not Katie Couric's contract, it's the dissemination and consumption of information, but science, future of work. And so if you go to Axios, like those are our sections, like every one of the sections that we have are issues that are going to shape the future, all narrated by people who have expertise in following. We have what we call a radiate theory, that we're pretty good at getting Jamie Dimon as a reader, or the president as a reader, or Sheryl Sandberg as a reader. And our theory is if you can write stuff that they find essential, that ultimately that will echo out to anybody else who cares about it. And so the early results are very encouraging. Like people respond very well to it. And the neatest thing is when we do reader surveys, we sent one out maybe 3 months in. We sent it out, and we didn't have that big a readership at the time. I think 12,000 people filled it out. It took 15 minutes. 6,000 volunteered to ask and answer any question we ever have. And it was so interesting to read it because people were responding to it using language that we would use inside of our meetings. They're saying, oh, you're helping me get smarter faster. Oh, you're making the reading of complex issues more efficient, more understandable, more approachable. This is easy to read, easy to share, it's clean. And so those things are super gratifying. So it's a long way of answering that there was an opportunity that we saw to fill. I believe that we're filling it. And now I actually think this could be exponentially bigger than we even thought when we launched it 9 months ago. And that's to me, one of the most astonishing things. We just launched 9 months ago. And I knew we were onto something when 2 months in, the New York Times was quoting Axios without saying what it is. I was like, come on, 2 months in is a new publication, and it was that, at least for people in the media, people in politics, people in technology, that they were that familiar with it, that they assumed their readership was familiar with it. And I know that a lot of people aren't familiar with it, so probably should have explained what it was and then said Axios.com.
Well, when you talk about, one of the resounding motifs of your address was this trust deficit that media and journalism is now operating in, especially given that Axios is such a new company. How does it operate within the rules of that game? How does it make itself trustworthy despite being so new and so fresh?
I mean, we have a formula. One is we hire people who are already respected in their area. So Mike Allen in politics, Dan Primack, who's probably the most respected writer on venture capital, Kim Hart, who's probably the most respected writer on the collision of technology in Washington, Sarah Fisher, who covers media trends. You hire people who already command respect and command a certain following. Then you create a culture that demands that we're there to write information. We don't have an opinion page. You're not allowed to pop off on Twitter with your opinion or on any social media, whether you're on the business side or the editorial side, because we all have a responsibility. Everybody in our company is an owner. Every person has a stock and will forever. in the company, so that they feel a sense of ownership, because that Axios, which in Greek means worthy, you're trustworthy of your time, like they have a responsibility. If you treat people like adults in a workplace, they'll respond like adults. If you put weird restrictions on them, they'll act like toddlers and throw their little toys.
Is that kind of a mission that appeals to, I guess, the almost half of Americans who don't really see the media as kind of producing trustworthy content, or even really, see it as a viable option of their own, information edification? Is that the target population, or is it people that already think journalism is, worthy of their time?
To me, when I look at the map in terms of people who should be consumers of Axios content over time, is anybody who's consuming serious news on a daily basis, or should be. So there's a big segment of the country that's never going to. I can't make people care. I just can't. But I can make the experience for people who want to care, who do care, way better. And so, yeah. So is that some of the people who thought fake news is fake news? Yeah, sure. We're definitely here from. I think we've got a nice ideological breakdown in our readership. I think people do trust us because we are very clinical. We're trying to explain what's happening, why it's happening. That's it. Every story, every item, if you go on the Axios stream, is what is new, what is interesting, and why does it matter? Why does it matter? How should I think about this based on somebody who spent their lifetime thinking about this topic and being in conversation with the people who spend the rest of their life thinking about this topic? Those are the only things I know that you can do to earn trust. And then when you're on TV, like doing me, or if I'm here, like not betraying an ideological bias and having an authenticity about yourself as a publication. And I think collectively, if you had any of the other people at Axios here, they would hopefully they would sound a lot like me, and that you would say, they're authentic, they care, they're in it for the right reasons, they're trying their best, and knowing we're not going to always get it right. We're going to screw stuff up, like we just are. But then don't hide and like bury your correction and do all the stupid tricks that people in media have done. Just say, we screwed up. This is how we screwed it up. Forgive us. Move on.
I guess what I'm trying to get is that a lot of what you deem to be the problem in journalism, people clicking on tricks for clicks, as you I think have termed it, if those people who aren't going to, I guess, legitimate or trustworthy publications kind of have proliferated this problem, why is it that the solution should kind of ignore these people that don't really get their news from trustworthy sources, that would never look towards Axios? Is it just to neglect them and to let them make their own news, their own facts? Or is there some sort of strategy for Axios as a new disruptive company to really reach those users, regardless of what their views are?
Again, you're not ignoring someone. It would be the person, the consumer would be the one ignoring it. Like the way you make yourself omnipresent is you want to make sure you're on that you're basically delivering your content in every ecosystem in a way that fits with the voice of that ecosystem. Meaning the way you display yourself on Apple has to be different than Facebook, has to be different than Snapchat, has to be different than Instagram, has to be different than newsletter, has to be different than web platform, different than if you're on TV. When that's out there, that's out there. Now they can choose. I can't make you choose. You might be really conservative, and you might only like fake news, and you might only read Breitbart, and you might only watch Sean Hannity. There's nothing I can do to change her. I can't say, no, Sean's an idiot. No, she's not going to listen to me. She's already, but I can put that out there and not tip the scales and not do anything for that person to distrust the content. And then just maybe on that second beer she's watching Sean late at night, she suddenly has a revelation. She says, you know what? I can trust this shit. I'm going to read that.
So you put out better content, people choose.
Yeah, there's not. Right. I don't. How else could you do it? You tell me.
I mean, that's not my field of expertise, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that maybe there is an angle that kind of encapsulates all of civil discourse, and all of the people who will cast ballots for public office, right? Is there an end game for journalism and for Axios that encapsulates all of the masses?
I don't know how to answer it any other way than this. I'm brutally clinical about life. I'm brutally clinical. I can look at the data, I can look at people, I can look at human nature, I can look at tendencies, I can look at trends, I can look at consumption. And I can tell you that that not just today, there always was a big segment of people who never cared about news. They don't have to care about news. It's the beauty of our system. For all the bitching about America, America's like an amazing country where you can thrive without ever picking up a newspaper, without ever going to Axios. You can do your job, be a good person, have a family. You're going to be fine.
Those who will go to Axios, though, what do you see as like the main value proposition? Is it the brevity, the efficiency? Is it the quality of content? If it's one single thing, what sets it apart from kind of the rest of the race?
It's definitely two things. It's the smarts and it's the efficiency. We call it, we're actually trademarking it, smart brevity, in that it's really smart. It's really easy to consume. It's really efficient. If you want to read more, you don't have to go to another page. It just drops down beautifully in your stream. You're not going to have a pop-up ad. It is, I think, the nicest possible user architecture created for media. It's awesome, and I have nothing to do with it. This woman, Alexis Lloyd, who is at the New York Times, she's working at the New York Times lab, and she was studying the future of news, looking at data. She came to the exact same conclusion that we did, coming at it from a totally different angle. She said, oh my gosh, this is exactly what people want. So by the time we met her, she could finish our sentences, and then she could do something I couldn't do, which is design something. And then Matt Bogie, who was also at the New York Times lab building that stuff, came on because he wanted to build it exactly the way that we were articulating it and the way that Alexis was designing it. And that's where, if you get the opportunity to be part of a startup, there is nothing more fun in your professional side of your life. It is a blast to like have an idea and to see an idea take off with a group of people who come at it with really different talent sets, really different backgrounds, that clash of ideas, the clash of personalities, the clash of egos, and then voila, an idea comes from that works, that people read or people trust. Like, they're just the coolest possible thing. And not everyone will be able to do it, but you should all look at yourselves as entrepreneurs, even if you're going to go through a more conventional route through work, and that it's not going to be my parents' generation where you're somewhere for 40 years. You're going to constantly be moving. You have to constantly think about the skill sets that you need. You have to constantly be aware. Listen, the world that you're going to live in is going to be much harder than the world that I grew up in, and that change is only going to get quicker. So everything is going to change. Robotics, artificial intelligence, automation is going to change each and every job, each and every industry, and it's going to happen quicker than most of us are capable of keeping up with. So it's going to require all of you to be a lot more entrepreneurial and not be that complacent in your professional life. Like you're from the right part of the gene pool, right? You're at this university, you're clearly smart as hell. Shame on you if you're not successful coming out of here, right? You got it going on. So.
Right. I want to delve a little bit, I know that my time is running out, but into the kind of product making process talked about, with that seamless user experience. I've been to the site. It is very beautiful, as you say. And part of that decision, I think, may have been to include, I guess, native advertising within that platform.
Yeah.
Do you think that complicates the quality of the content in any way in terms of presenting information to the user?
Right.
And what was the kind of decision-making rationale behind that?
Well, one, I'm a capitalist. I believe that I'm a big believer that for-profit companies, and they create a type of culture and a type of company that's going to be a lot more dynamic. And so, like, I love that people put money into not-for-profits. I don't think that's the best solution for journalism. I think for-profit companies are the best. There's only a couple ways to make money in journalism. You can sell subscriptions, you can sell ads, you can do that. So they're basically the three ways of making money in journalism. So for me, as long as you're marking something as sponsored content or as an ad, I'm all for it. I'm very pro it. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's sit down. If you're going to design an ad that is it provides the least amount of intrusion and distraction for the reader, but forces the reader to interact with it in a way that the advertiser gets value. Like, too many media companies are, oh, advertisers. It's your money. If you don't have advertising, you don't have money. You don't have money, you don't have a job. So then there's no company. So you want to make that experience beautiful for the reader, beautiful for the advertiser. So all we did is we looked at what is the best experience out there for the advertiser, for the reader. It's with Facebook, like setting up the nice stream where you go through, because it's there, you can choose whether or not to stop. You're working with a small space, so if you're clever about your graphics, your video, your headlines, you can actually get awesome interaction with it. Our ads have about a 2 to 4x engagement improvement from any other ad for that very reason, because we put a lot of time thinking into the making those as beautiful as the content themselves. So as long as they're labeled, that's all you can do. That's all you should do, and you need them. If you take them away, you've got nothing. Because one of the dumbest things that the media industry did, maybe one of the dumbest things any industry has done in the history of all industries, was that our industry, when the internet came along, we said, hey, you know what, let's all band together. Let's take a product that's extremely expensive to produce, really valuable, something the consumer really likes a lot, you know what we should do? Let's give it away for free. Wouldn't that be an awesome idea? So that's what we did. For 10 years, we habituated an entire generation of consumers to take something for free that cost a lot of money. You don't get your music for free. You don't get your movies for free. You don't get your food for free. But we were giving away a product for free. And so that needs to be corrected, and one way is through subscriptions. But you've been habituated to not pay for content. So other than the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, FT, but and I would say the Wall Street Journal and the FT are business expenses, so I put them in a different category. The New York Times, and only recently the Washington Post. There's very few examples of content companies that people are willing to pay enough money for to support a viable media company. That is what it is. And I'm talking about in the sort of the written news space. Maybe that changes with time. I don't know. We'll see if it does. I think that's an open question, but that's a long way of saying I love our ads.
Unfortunately for me, but good for the rest of you, this is my last question. And among all the things we've talked about, from the internet to advertising to quality content, fake news, a lot of people would say that money is the biggest kind of factor when it comes to journalism in the industry. And you've said in the past that at Politico you guys reached kind of what you call the nirvana, where 50% of your revenue came from ads, the other 50% was subscriptions.
Yeah.
Why is it not 100 to 0? Why is that? Because it's not feasible, or is it because the ads genuinely provide, I guess, value for the stakeholders and for the readers in consuming that content?
Well, the reason it's not, number one, so at Politico, the subscription side is not like the New York Times. At Politico, we created what we call Politico Pro, which is a high-end subscription service for people who are doing politics and policy professionally. So the starting price is $8,000. So it's not like you're buying that, or we're buying that. You would have to be doing it as a business, and it turned out to be an awesome business. But if that's all we did, all we would have been doing is writing content for a very small sliver of people that saw great value in it, but you're not really doing the public service dimension of it. If I just wanted to build a business just to make money, that's what I would do. It's the easiest way to make money in journalism right now. High-end information, charge a lot of money, boom. I don't like that. I like it as a business, but I don't like it alone. I like it if it helps support public journalism. So Politico, a couple weeks ago, it was like one of the finest moments since I've left Politico to watch. We had created a healthcare vertical as our first one. It cost you about 10 grand for a company or association to get it. Our theory was, if we could get 6 or 8 people covering healthcare, and you're doing it with people who are doing it at the most granular level, a couple times a year, they're going to come across awesome journalism of political consequence. Or there's going to be a difficult, complex debate, but you're going to have all this brain power behind it, and you take that content and you put it public. So the group of people that exposed the HHS secretary and forced him out because he was doing illegal travel was from that Politico Pro team. So the theory of the case worked, but I think you need both. The public dimension of journalism is why I'm a journalist. The fact that you can make a difference, that you can inform tons of people, that you can help shape how people are seeing really important ideas, that part of it, at least based on the economics and the habits today, has to be supported by advertising. There's not another way around it. So, I run into people, especially out here a lot, who don't like advertising. I'm begging you, like advertising. You got to, otherwise there's no way to support the type of content that you're reading. And it's not bad. I actually think the advertising is starting to get better. And so if you don't have that, you're not going to have the content that you're getting for free. That's just the laws of economics.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for answering my questions. Now we're going to turn things over to all of you, the audience. If you have a question for Jim, Mr. VandeHei, please raise your hand. We'll do our best to get to start at any time.
So in the spirit of Axios' mission of varied information succinctly, I have 2 succinct questions for you. First, you've advocated for an anti-establishment innovation party. If we have a Zuckerberg or a Sandberg run in 2020, how do you see their path to getting to 270? And then also, given that there's a lot of anti-establishment values in our generation, what would you say to those young people like myself and millennials and slightly older who look at Axios and see some of the business partners such as banks, pharma, cook industries, and are skeptical that Axios is the best forum to really give trustworthy anti-establishment information?
Yeah, all I can say is, I mean, the beauty of the content is it's there. Like, you can read it, you're either going to trust it or not. You might not like the Koch brothers, you might not like a bank, you might not like the Wildlife Federation, whoever it is that's advertising any given day. Like, if that scares you off, like, I can't change it. That advertisers advertise, and I'm not discriminating against advertisers as long as you're not saying something that's mean-spirited, like totally wrong or violent or whatever. Like, we have our parameters on that. And so, but what I would say, look at the content. Look at the totality of the content. Is this something that you find edifying? Is it something that you trust? Is this something that's making you smarter, faster? If it's not, don't read it. If it is, read a lot more of it. And then tell your friends about it, Axios.com. I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal during my period between leaving Politico. I had a cooling off period before I started Axios. And the point of the piece was that that the system needs a shock, right? That in some ways, like, you need something different than what we have. And I sort of threw out like different ideas, like Zuckerberg, whoever, like, but somebody who's thinking about it differently. In that, and I actually believe this even more powerfully today than I did then, that the system, like, put aside Trump, like, the system, in some ways, is so detached from the reality that we're about to have. We have two political parties that spend their time arguing about things that made a lot of sense 15 years ago, made some sense 10 years ago, still make a little bit of sense, but they're not actually the topics that are going to define whether or not China eats our lunch in the next 20 years. You've got to be able to modernize government. Like, cybersecurity, I guarantee you the next catastrophe we have will flow from some cyber attack that none of us are thinking about right now. That if you don't have the right technologists and the right technology redoing government, you're hugely vulnerable. Then you take that overseas. We grew up in a time of conventional wars, right? And we're going to take boots on the ground, we're going to go to war with another country. That's never going to happen again. All of these things are going to be fought in space, and they're going to be fought with drones. And any given day, this very day, this would have been true under Obama too, we're executing people via drone in 4 different countries. Have been for the last 6, 7 years. Will be probably forever. And our enemies aren't necessarily just going to be nation states. They're going to be things like Al-Qaeda metastasizing into ISIS, which will metastasize into something else, which requires a government that basically fought wars the same way for a long time to rethink about the War Powers Act and how do you move and fast enough to be able to adapt to these different threats. Then you look domestically, like, what is the fundamental challenge? You can bemoan globalization all you want, and there's pros and cons to it, but the technology is only going to bring people and countries closer together, markets closer together. That is the arc of history. I don't believe you can bend it any other way. So then you have to look at the country and you say, well, what is it that we need to do to make sure that this is the best damn country 10 years from now? Well, one, you better make sure that this is the place that people want to come and start businesses. It still is. People love this country. They might be down on it because of Trump or different dynamics that we have, but like, people love America. They still think it's the best place to start companies, the best place to birth new ideas. But if you don't get that right over time, if you don't get, are we getting people who come here? Are we getting immigrants who want to come here and start companies, to come here, start companies and stay here? Are you creating a tax code that makes sense in a globalized system where you have mass amounts of competitors that might have a competitive disadvantage or competitive advantage overseas? So you need to be able to rewire the country on the domestic side and on the foreign side to make sure that we continue to crush it. And we are, like, for all the hang-dog crap I hear about, oh my God, America's going to hell. It's not going to hell. Like, we built a company in Europe before we left Politico. I would much rather be an American than be sitting in Europe. Like, they're in a lot of trouble. Like, their governing system doesn't work. Their borders are really porous. They're dealing with terrorist threats and the effects of that and migration in ways that are much more powerful than some of the debates that we're having here. Oh, China. Well, come on. Yes, they can steal our ideas, which they do. They can bully companies into doing things in their country. They can do that. They have lots of people, but it's like a crappy governing system that doesn't have as dynamic of a culture, and it's not, I don't believe, going to be a long-term threat, as big a long-term threat as people fear, if we get those things right. Otherwise, if we don't, it will, or India will, or Vietnam will, or whoever else will. And so that's a long way of answering the journal piece about just saying, like, I do think that there probably needs to be a new set of ideas that people are talking about. And it actually might happen soon, because in some ways, look at what's happening with the two parties. in some ways we probably should have 4 political parties right now. Because the difference between like the Trump wing of the party and sort of the Ryan wing of the party, they're almost 2 different parties. They really pull themselves apart. The difference between the Clinton wing and the Sanders wing is pretty profound. I think really profound. And that Sanders wing is only getting pulled further to the left. And so in some ways, if you had 4 different parties right now on a lot of these topics, you might have the Sanders wing and the Trump wing often teaming up. Certainly when it comes to issues like trade, US jobs. And so I don't know how this plays out. All I know is that every single job, every single sector is getting disrupted and will continue to get disrupted. And I don't think politics is any different. Now, is technology or the technologists, the Zuckerbergs of the world, the solution? I don't know. I think that those companies have a bigger political pride. I don't think Mark Zuckerberg hired David Plouffe and other people because he's thinking he's going to run for president. I think he smartly realized he has a hell of a political problem on his hands. That the more people learn about what's happening on Facebook, the more they're going to see their popularity fade, the more that they're going to see regulators regulate. I think it is the single biggest story in this country this year, if you didn't have Trump as president, is that you basically now have this country starting to look at these big social platforms that we gave all of our data, all of our time, all of our mind share, and people are starting to think, whoa, wait a second, did we give them too much? Were they too unregulated? Is there too much mischief happening that we weren't aware of? And should there be a correction? I think there'll be a correction. And I think Europe in some ways is a template there, because Europe has a much different view of data privacy, data protection, and these big companies than we do. And so they regulate them more, they tax them more, they fine them more, and that creates a template for what could happen here. I'm not guaranteeing it does happen here, but it might. And so we had last week, we had Sheryl Sandberg. We're the one company that interviewed her for a half hour. Mike Allen on stage. We grilled her pretty tough. Like, they know they're in for a grilling on Capitol Hill about what was happening on that platform, what responsibility they have to be aware of it sooner than they actually were, and what do they have to do now to make sure that that doesn't happen again. And it's an amazing story. I think the best book that's going to be written is going to be the Mueller report. Because think about it, everyone's like, oh, like is he going to indict Trump? I don't know. I have my own theories on that. But what he is going to do is he's not just looking at Trump. He's looking at the entire system. So he is going to pull together a report that looks at a foreign company manipulating for the price of donuts our election on an unregulated platform that may or may not have been in cahoots with a campaign or elements around a campaign, to undoubtedly influence, at least in some ways, the election. We will never know if it was decisive, but we'll know that it was profound and potentially decisive, but we'll never know decisive. That then spawned all kinds of crazy activity, including the firing of Comey, which probably will go down in history as one of the dumbest things that a president's ever done, because it then gave him Robert Mueller, who will write the report that I'm talking about. And so, like, it's scary times. There's no doubt. Like, I probably feel the same fears that you guys do, but it's also a fascinating time because all of this stuff is coming together. And that's what I was talking. I mean, that's why we never would have predicted it when we launched Axios, but our theory was all this stuff will collide. We didn't really know it would collide in this spectacular of a fireworks show, but it has.
So I just had a question regarding your comments on for-profit news media. Yep. So I'm actually from Canada, and in Canada our primary news source is Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. In the UK it's the BBC. And at least from my personal experience, is that people often trust these state-owned media sources primarily because they have less of an incentive to, as you mentioned earlier, resort to the lowest common denominator, and be more serious about their news because they have a relatively stable source of funding. So I just wanted to gauge your impact on sort of these state-owned media resources and whether such a platform, like whether something similar could work in the United States.
I mean, we have PBS and NPR, which obviously get some amount of public funding. I don't think that's the answer. I don't think, even if it were the answer, it's never going to be the only thing unless you had total state control, which then stomps out like capitalism. So I would be opposed to that. And so again, like looking at it clinically, like It's an interesting question. It's just not going to happen. So I don't spend a whole lot of time entertaining the possibility. I do agree with you. I don't know. I'm familiar with Canadian broadcasting, but I'm not going to lie to you. I don't watch it. But the BBC, I am pretty familiar with it. Man, it's a great place. Lots of great places for information. It can come, and even when I'm dogging on not-for-profits, I'm dogging on the culture that a not-for-profit can create, not the output. I love that we have lots of not-for-profits that are doing investigative reporting, which is the hardest type of reporting to actually create a business model around. But to me, you're going to always end up with a mix of all those things. And so if it works in Canada, that's great that it works in Canada. I will say if you go to Britain, yes, you have the BBC, but I don't know if that's often the dominant voice. London is now a hotbed for almost every single media company is now creating a London outpost, and you have BuzzFeed and Business Insider, and you have the tabloids there. I mean, London, other than New York, is probably one of the hottest places in terms of having like a really vibrant media market that gets you from a bunch of different angles. And so I think again, I'm a big fan of more, but I'm also a big fan of like you understanding what it is you're reading and whether or not you can trust it or should trust it, and if something is fake or something is nonsense, that there's a way for you to be able to really easily pick up that that's fake or that's nonsense. We're not there yet.
Unfortunately, for the sake of time, we only have time for one more question. With Myra to speak up. But.
Okay, so this is a product question, and it's about your decision to start a newsletter,
Yeah.
per se. And I know obviously it's not some big VC guy who's about podcasts, and how that's kind of like a shift in the media consumption that's kind of losing their voice because of just the way that we're consuming it. Really, like, as media progresses, do you think newsletters is going to be like the go-to for like old media to also transmit? Like, what do you see like the trends of like how we consume media? Is it really going to be
Right.
like something
It's hard for me to tell what it looks like beyond the next couple of years. I think over the next couple of years, I think media consumption is going to become more and more awesome. In that, as you get from like 4G to 5G to 6G, as you get, like, networks are quick enough. I think what you're going to have is like, newsletters are interesting. Because newsletters, in terms of like really, especially hyper engaged readers, they're awesome. Like our newsletters do it extraordinarily well. And people love it. Why? Because it's efficient. It's pushed to you. It's shorter. It's smarter. It often has more voice. I think what we'll see, and I think you'll hopefully see it from us, is, to me, ideally, newsletters, podcasts, all of that stuff blends itself into sort of an app stream, meaning that you have a watch, listen, read experience that's tailored to what you might want or the way that you want to consume information, utilizing all these technologies, which are a lot cheaper to do today than they would have been 3 or 4 years ago. That will be a great, great, great consumption experience, which and is a great production experience. Like the opportunity is, I don't know how many people in here are in journalism or are going to go into the media. I don't know who we have in here. I think sometimes people come in and they're like, oh my God, media sucks, it's dying. Like, it's not. Like, it is way better to be you than it is to be me. In terms of, like, because you're coming of age and you're coming into it with this skill set that totally matches the moment. Like, the moment needs, like, there's going to be the boom over the next couple of years, and the need for video content is going to be insane. Look at the money that, not just ESPN, we had this. If you're in media, you've got to go to Axios.com and subscribe to our Media Trends newsletter. She is the smartest person I've ever met thinking about media. She had this thing the other day about how Netflix now is almost tied with ESPN in terms of paying for content. And so it's not just that Snapchat, not paying for it, but Snapchat will pay for it, but they'll do better rev shares now. Facebook's starting to pay for a lot more content. All of these new distribution channels that are going to replace cable, and nobody knows what will replace it, but everyone knows something will replace it. The demand for video content, demand for audio content, the demand for, I would still say, text-based content, it's only getting better. And you're growing up with that skill set, and you're growing up with those consumption habits. So you're actually much better positioned to help solve the future than somebody who's my age or older and grew up sort of in a static, I just read a newspaper this way experience. And so, like, you should not go into the profession being bummed. You should go into it being like very, very, very optimistic. People are, like I said, if they're consuming 12 hours of media content of some form each and every day, like, just get in the fight for their mind share. And that's what it is now. It's now a battle of mind share. That's why, like, that's why you have all of these companies trying to diversify. That's why Facebook, you basically, at some point you hit all the people you're going to hit, and then it's all about battle to to get more of their mind share over the course of the day. That's going to benefit the content producers, the content distributors, the content editors. And so it's a great time to go and be part of that. And podcasts to be part of it. Like podcasts, often we chase mirages in our industry. We're like, oh, traffic. Oh, then you wake up and then okay, it's actually not that great. And then it was video 5 years ago. It was great. You produce a lot of video. It turns out you still couldn't like monetize it. Podcasts are hot. People are tons. I'm always like, show me, okay, yes, that's great. You've got X number of viewers or X number of listeners. How much money are you making off that? How much money did it cost you to produce it? If the cost of production is greater than the money you're making off it, it's not actually costing you business. It might be a good investment long term, but it's actually not a good business. Podcasts are still, for the most part, are still there. They get a good audience, but there's not a ton of money attached to it. Doesn't mean that there won't be, and I think it'll come from all of that stuff starting to live together and some of the stuff sorting itself out in terms of we have so many content producers now and so many distribution networks. So eventually the stuff will narrow itself down. But podcasts will definitely be a piece of it. I can take more questions if people have more questions. I don't have to go anywhere, but if you have to like shut the
We have
cameras.
to close off the event, but if you're happy to stay afterwards, I'm sure there are a lot of people
Okay,
who
maybe
would love to talk to you. But Jim, it was an absolute pleasure having you up here. At this point, I'd like to invite back up our President Haley Pekovitz to close out tonight's event.
Thank you so much again. Thank you so much again, Jim, for being here, and to our student moderator for the evening, Michael Chen. At every Berkeley Forum event, we design a custom poster for each speaker to commemorate the evening. So thank you so much for being here. Okay. Throughout the month, the Berkeley Forum is working to raise over $4,000 this semester through our crowdfunding campaign. The funding raised from this campaign will be directly used to 1, increase resources we devote to inviting more out-of-state speakers, 2, host our events in more central off-campus venues, and 3, establish a high school outreach program to give back to members of our external community. Thanks to your support, the forum has reached around 75% of our goal, but with less than half a month left, we need all the help we can get. You can very easily help by donating through our crowdfunding website, writing a check, or sending even a few dollars to our Venmo account. Visit our website, Facebook page, or registration table on your way out for details on how you can help if you'd like to see more events like this one put on this campus. We'd also really like to thank our co-hosts for this evening, the Graduate School of Journalism. Thank you guys so much for giving us this wonderful venue. We're really excited to be here. If you're interested in seeing more of their events, you can follow them on their website or on Twitter at UCBSOJ. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope to see you at a future event.